My husband pushed a folded catering apron into my hands and nodded toward the woman standing outside the ballroom. "Tell her she's working tonight," he said. "If anyone asks, she is not my mother." Through the glass doors, I could see Diane Mercer smoothing the skirt of her navy dress. She was holding a gift bag and a photograph of Evan at 12, grinning through a gap where one front tooth had been. 12 minutes later, my husband was supposed to accept the Halpern Civic Courage Award in front of 300 donors for building Second Start, the youth housing nonprofit he said had grown from losing both parents before high school. His father really had died. His mother was 10 feet away, very much alive, waiting for someone to let her in. "You told them she was dead?" I asked. Evan glanced toward the stage door, where the gala producer was signaling that the sound check had started. "I told them the version that matters. We can have this fight tomorrow." Then he pressed the apron against my ribs and lowered his voice. "Tonight you either help me protect 200 kids, or you help her destroy everything." I understood then that the award was not honoring a misunderstanding. It was honoring a lie he expected me to perform. I did not put the apron on Diane. I wish I could say I opened the doors, took her hand, and marched her straight to the head table. Instead, I stepped into the corridor, closed the ballroom doors, and said, "Diane, can we talk somewhere quiet for 5 minutes?" The hope left her face before I finished. She looked at the apron in my hands, then past me at Evan, who had already turned away. "He knows I'm here," she said. It was not a question. Diane and I had not spoken in 8 years. Evan said she had chosen that distance after another argument about money. I believed him because the last conversation I witnessed ended with Diane calling him ungrateful and Evan telling her never to contact us again. She had missed our 10th anniversary, my father's funeral, and every Second Start benefit. At home, her name was a locked drawer neither of us opened. I knew Evan let audiences assume she was gone. I had heard him say he had grown up without a mother and buried the idea of family young. I treated those phrases as the shorthand of a hurt son. I had never heard him say she died. "Who invited you?" I asked. Diane held out an ivory card with the gala logo. The name written in copper ink was Diane Mercer, family table. "Leah called me," she said. Leah was Evan's younger sister, who maintained a strained but real relationship with their mother. A woman from Second Start asked Leah for a childhood photograph. She said the award committee wanted immediate family here for a surprise. Leah said Evan was finally ready to tell the truth. The stage speakers came alive through the wall. A boy's voice said, "When Evan Mercer was 13, a motel fire took the last parent he had." Diane placed one hand flat against the wall as if the corridor had tilted. The sentence repeated while the technician adjusted the level. It did not sound like grief. It sounded like copy. "There was no fire," Diane said. "There was a motel. There was an eviction. But nobody died." Evan came through the doors with his award night smile, the one that made his eyes look warm while the rest of his face stayed still. "Mom, I'm sorry Leah misled you," he said. "This is a closed event." Diane looked at her invitation. "It has my name on it. It was issued in error. Your staff called my daughter. And my staff made a mistake." He looked at me. "Nora, the green room. Please." That please was for the banquet captain walking past with a tray of water glasses. I led Diane to a narrow room behind the coat check because I still thought privacy might reduce the damage. The moment the door shut, Evan stopped pretending. He said the public story began 6 years earlier, when a donor asked why he cared about homeless teenagers. He had answered emotionally, newspapers repeated it, and a foundation built a campaign around it. Correcting the record now could freeze a $3 million capital campaign for a transitional housing building. 22 staff members were counting on the expansion. 40 beds were planned. "So I'm dead because the truth was inconvenient?" Diane asked. "You were gone when I needed you. I was working nights at a nursing home. You left us in that motel alone. For 6 hours, with Mrs. Alvarez next door, because my shift changed and the car had been repossessed." Evan laughed once. "There. You always have a detail that makes abandonment sound responsible. Diane's mouth tightened. And you always have an audience that makes cruelty sound brave. I stepped between them. What exactly happens tonight? Evan said the film would play, board chair Celeste Warren would introduce him, and he would announce the new building, Diane's house, named for the mother he had lost. A lead donor would present a ceremonial commitment. Then I would join him for the final photograph. You named a building after her? My voice rose enough that a volunteer outside paused. Evan lowered his. After the idea of what a mother should have been. Diane sat hard in a folding chair. The gift bag tipped between her shoes. What's in the bag? I asked. His father's watch, she said. Leah thought he might want it tonight. Evan looked at the bag, and for one unguarded second I saw the boy from the photograph. Then the stage manager knocked. 10 minutes to doors. His face closed again. Mom, leave now and I will meet you tomorrow. Nora will arrange a car. I took the bus. Then she'll get you a car. I did not come for a ride home. Evan turned to me. Explain the stakes to her. I should have told him to explain his own lie. Instead I crouched in front of Diane and said, if the pledge is tied to the story, walking into that room could hurt people who had nothing to do with this. She studied me. Is that what he told you to say? Part of it was. I ran operations at a community dental clinic. I knew what a delayed grant did to payroll and families waiting for care. Evan had built his defense around the argument most likely to work on me, innocent people would pay. I'm asking for 5 minutes to find out what can be stopped without setting fire to the organization. Diane looked toward the wall when the voice repeated that she had died. You have 3. After that, I decide whether I sit at the table on my invitation. Evan followed me into the hall. You cannot let her in. I can't physically keep an invited guest out. Security can. On what basis? Disruption. She hasn't disrupted anything. He leaned close enough that I could smell the mint he used before speeches. Then tell them she is confused. Tell them she used to help with catering and wandered into the wrong entrance. I stared at him. You want me to tell security your mother is confused? I want you to prevent a scene. By making her look senile? Don't use that word. You handed me an apron. His anger broke through. My sister sabotaged the biggest night of my life, and you are grading my language. A young man wearing a second start pin rounded the corner. I recognized Malik Harris, one of the first teenagers Evan mentored and now the evening's MC. He looked through the half-open door. Mrs. Mercer? Diane stood. Malik? His surprise shifted into recognition. You served breakfast at the Jefferson pantry. You taught me how to make biscuits when the oven broke. Evan's whole body went still. Malik smiled uncertainly. Mr. Mercer said you moved away. Diane answered, I moved across town. The easy solution disappeared. The young man about to narrate Evan's dead mother's story knew her face, her name, and her voice. Evan recovered first. He put a hand on Malik's shoulder and said, there's some family history you don't know, and tonight isn't the place to unpack it. Malik's smile faded. I'm reading the voiceover. Exactly. So stay focused on the run sheet. Evan steered him toward the ballroom, but Malik looked back at Diane. The film says you died. No one answered. The banquet captain walked past again, slower this time. Evan told Malik the film used composite language, a phrase that meant nothing and sounded expensive. Malik said, a person isn't composite language. That was the first resistance Evan had not planned for. He told Malik they would talk after the award, then ordered the producer through his headset to hold the doors. Guests had already begun gathering in the lobby, and the soft murmur beyond the corridor was rising. We had minutes, not hours, but I still believed I could separate the false story from the actual work. I asked Malik to bring Celeste Warren, the board chair, and no one else. Evan said there was no need. I said, if the pledge can collapse because your living mother sits at her assigned table, the board already needs to know. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to injure me, but hard enough to make the instruction physical. You are my wife. I pulled free. That is not authority. Diane saw it. Malik saw it. So did Celeste, who had turned the corner in time to catch the end. Celeste was a retired judge with silver braids and a habit of becoming quieter when everyone else became loud. She asked Evan to remove his headset. He refused until she held out her hand and waited. Then she asked Diane who she was. His mother, Diane said. Not a good enough one, according to him. But not a dead one. Celeste looked at me. I told her what Evan had demanded and what the film said. I did not soften the apron. I held it up. Evan began talking about narrative compression, donor expectations, and the distinction between biological presence and functional abandonment. Celeste stopped him. Did you tell the award committee your mother died in a motel fire? The committee received my standard biography. Did you approve that biography? My communications team did. Did you approve the film? He hesitated for half a second. In concept. Celeste asked the gala producer, who had appeared beside Malik, whether the film could be removed. The producer said yes, but the donor presentation and teleprompter would need to change. Evan said removing it would breach the event agreement. Celeste said, that is a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, we do not display a false death. I felt my lungs open for the first time. The board could stop the film. Diane did not have to walk into a lie. Then the gala producer looked at me and said, we also need to remove Nora's closing statement. I had no closing statement. She showed me the final page of the run sheet. After the award, I was scheduled to say, Evan taught me that family can be built after every person you were born to is gone. The sentence appeared in quotation marks under my name. A pre-recorded rehearsal clip of me saying something similar was already embedded in the donor reel. 3 months earlier, a videographer had interviewed me at our kitchen table. He asked what I admired about Evan. I said Evan had built family after losing the people he believed he could depend on. I had repeated the emotional version I knew, careful not to accuse Diane by name. Someone had cut away 9 words and turned people he believed he could depend on into every person he was born to. My face and voice were going to confirm his mother's death without my knowledge. Take it out, I said. The producer glanced at Evan. He said, we don't have time to rebuild the reel. Then don't play the reel. Nora, you signed a release. For my interview. Not for words I didn't say. Celeste's eyes moved from the run sheet to Evan. Who approved the edit? Evan blamed Kendra, the communications director. Kendra was in the lobby greeting donors and had worked 60-hour weeks to build the campaign. I almost accepted the answer because it gave me a person outside our marriage to be angry at. Then Malik said, Kendra sent me 3 versions. The last one came from your personal email, Mr. Mercer. Evan told him he was mistaken. Malik opened the production thread on his phone, but Celeste did not read it there. She asked him to forward it to the organization's general counsel and told everyone to stop discussing files in a hallway. It was a sensible boundary, and it made Evan furious. He turned on me. You asked for Celeste. Now the pledge is in danger before Mom has said one word. Diane flinched at Mom, perhaps because it was the first time he had called her that all night. I said, the pledge is in danger because you killed her in a film. Evan's answer came fast. I made strangers understand what it felt like. Diane's voice was rough. Then say I failed you. Say I chose work over being home. Say I drank too much after your father died. Say you were scared and angry and I didn't see enough of it. Those things are true. This was the first time I had heard her admit any of that. Evan had always described her as denying everything. Diane kept going. But you don't get to turn my worst years into my funeral because death tests better with donors. The hallway went quiet. Her admission complicated the story in exactly the way Evan's speeches never did. She had not been the mother he needed. she also had not abandoned 2 children in a burning motel. Celeste asked Diane whether she wanted to leave, sit at the family table, or wait in a private room while the board changed the program. "Those are all options," she said. "No one is putting you on stage." Diane looked at me. "Did you know about the building name?" "No." "Did you know he said I died?" "No." "Did you know I wrote?" Evan cut in. "We are not doing this." Diane reached into her purse and pulled out a small stack of envelopes held by a rubber band. They were not evidence she had brought for a confrontation, they were birthday cards she had hoped to give him if the evening went well. The top envelopes bore old postage labels and our former addresses. Return to sender was stamped across 2 of them. One had our current address and a yellow sticker that said refused. I knew Evan collected the mail. I also knew I had never seen any of those envelopes. "He said you asked us not to contact you," I told her. "He told me you asked him to keep me away from you." The room changed shape. Until then, I had thought I was married to a man who had turned real childhood pain into a fundraising myth and panicked when its subject appeared. The returned letters showed something colder. He had maintained 2 different estrangements, telling each woman the other had chosen it. Evan said the cards proved nothing except that he did not want contact. That was true in the narrowest sense. Adults can refuse contact with a parent. They can also describe the harm that led to it. The betrayal was not that he had set a boundary with Diane. It was that he had used my name to make the boundary appear mutual, then used my edited voice to certify her death. "Did you ever tell her I wanted no contact?" I asked. "I protected our marriage from her chaos." "Did you ever tell me she sent cards?" "I protected our marriage from her chaos." He repeated the sentence exactly, like a line he had rehearsed for himself. I asked one more question. "Does Leah know you tell donors she died?" He looked away. Diane answered. "Not until today. The gala producer said doors had to open or the venue would start charging overtime and guests would crowd the lobby. Celeste decided the event would begin 15 minutes late, without the film, without my fabricated quote, and without the capital campaign announcement. The other 2 honorees would still be recognized. The Halpern Award Committee representative was already in the building. Celeste would brief her privately. Evan said the board could not rewrite his night without a vote. Celeste said they were not removing him from office or deciding guilt in a corridor. They were pausing false material and an unverified pledge. "You can accept the award after the committee hears the accurate facts," she said. "Or you can take the stage tonight without our authorization. Those are your choices." For a moment, I thought the crisis had narrowed. The film was stopped. Diane had options. The non-profit would continue its legitimate event. Then Evan looked through the doors at the donors taking their seats, at the copper-lit stage built around his name, and I saw that he had not spent 6 years constructing an orphan because he could tolerate an ordinary correction. He took his headset back from Celeste's hand and walked into the ballroom. The producer called after him. On stage, the house lights dimmed. Malik's microphone was still live. Evan reached it before anyone could cut the sound. "Good evening," he said, smiling into the light. "Apparently, some people have decided that the truth of my life belongs to a committee." Diane closed her eyes. Celeste told the audio technician to mute him, but the technician hesitated because Evan was the executive director and 300 guests were watching. That hesitation gave him the opening he wanted. He began telling the audience that a difficult relative had arrived to derail a night meant for homeless youth. Then he lifted one hand toward the corridor and said my name. "Nora knows what I survived," he told the room. "Ask my wife." I had planned to keep the correction backstage. Evan dragged it under the lights. My strategy changed before I took my first step toward the ballroom. I walked through the doors with the catering apron still folded over my arm. The room was so quiet I could hear a fork hit a plate near the back. Evan stood beneath a 20-foot photograph of himself at 14, looking thinner and younger than I had ever known him, with the words "N01" left behind him. He extended his hand as if we had rehearsed this entrance together. I stopped beside table 14 instead. Diane stood just inside the doorway, uncertain whether to follow. Malik remained near the stairs to the stage, his cue cards hanging at his side. I did not take the microphone. I did not need it for the first sentence. "Your mother is alive," I said. The words carried farther than I expected. Evan's hand dropped. I held up the apron. "She was invited to the family table. You told me to identify her as Catering so this story could continue." A few phones rose. Celeste moved to the sound booth and ordered the house lights up. Evan spoke over me. "Nora is upset. My mother's presence in a biological sense is not the same as having a mother." "Then say that," I answered. "Say she hurt you. Say you are estranged. Do not say she died in a fire, and do not use my edited voice to say it for you." That was the bounded truth I intended to give. I should have stopped there. Instead, anger outran judgment. I pointed toward Diane and said, "Ask the woman you buried for donations." Diane recoiled as if I had pushed her into the spotlight. I saw it immediately. Evan had tried to turn her into a prop, and in my effort to expose him, I had done it too. "No," she said, loud enough for the nearest tables. "Nobody asks me anything." She turned away from the room. I followed her into the corridor, leaving Evan on stage. Behind us, Celeste reached the microphone and told guests there would be a brief pause. There were whispers, chair legs scraping, and the confused crying of a toddler at one of the family tables. That was what public truth sounded like, not victory, just a room losing its script. Diane kept walking until we reached the lobby. "I'm sorry," I said. "You were right to correct him," she answered. "You were wrong to offer me to the room." "I know." "Do you?" "I do now." She set the gift bag on a bench. Her hands were shaking. I asked whether she wanted a car, and she almost laughed. "Still trying to send me home?" "No. I'm trying to ask what you want." She said she wanted her coat, the bus schedule, and no camera. I got all three. Before she left, Malik came into the lobby and handed her the old family photograph she had dropped. He did not ask for a statement. He simply said, "Your biscuits were terrible that first week." Diane smiled despite herself. "The donated flour had bugs. You told us they were seeds. You ate them. We were hungry." Their exchange lasted 15 seconds, and it did more damage to Evan's myth than any document could have. It showed a shared memory too awkward and ordinary to have been manufactured for a gala. Diane touched Malik's cheek, then pulled her hand back as if uncertain she had permission. "You grew up good," she said. "Working on it," he replied. When she left, Malik asked me what he should do. He was not an employee with the power to investigate his mentor. He was a 26-year-old man who had been asked to narrate someone else's childhood and had just learned part of it was false. I told him he did not owe the room an explanation. He returned his cue cards to the producer and said he would introduce the other honorees but not Evan. Inside the ballroom, Celeste had muted the main microphone. Evan was speaking from the stage edge to the award committee representative, Margaret Halpern, while guests watched. He argued that the central facts of his childhood were true: poverty, eviction, his father's death, his mother's alcoholism, nights when he did not know where she was. Margaret did not dispute his suffering. She said the award cited a published biography with a specific death, and the building announcement used that death to solicit a named pledge. The committee would not present the award until it reviewed the discrepancy. Evan looked at me when I re-entered. "You did this," he said. "You invited the contradiction onto the stage," I answered. He asked whether I understood that the lead donor could walk. The donor, a regional bank foundation, had committed $250,000 contingent on board approval of the campaign materials and final naming agreement. No money had transferred that night. That mattered. The lights and oversized ceremonial check had made the pledge feel irreversible, but it was not. The foundation representative, Allison Park, said the bank supported transitional housing, not a specific autobiography. Existing program grants would continue under their contracts. The capital pledge would pause while the board reviewed the campaign. Evan had turned uncertainty into a threat because he needed me to believe that one honest sentence would put teenagers on the street. It would delay a building. It might cost the expansion. It would not close Second Start tomorrow. You said 200 kids would lose help tonight, I told him. I said everything was at risk. You picked the number that would make me obey. I picked the stakes you would understand. The contempt in that answer ended something before either of us used the word marriage. Celeste announced a 30-minute intermission and invited guests to remain for the other honorees or request that their meal donations be reassigned. Some left. Most stayed, though conversation broke into uneasy clusters. The producer removed Evan's backdrop. Staff rolled the ceremonial check behind a curtain. Nobody cheered. Nobody denounced him in a dramatic wave. Kendra, the communications director, cried in a service alcove because her name had been used as the explanation for an edit she had warned against. She showed Celeste an email on her own phone only long enough to establish that the full production record had already been preserved in the organization's system. Evan had written, "Nora's meaning is clear. Tighten the quote." Kendra had replied that the new sentence was not what I said. Evan approved it anyway. Celeste placed him on paid administrative leave pending a board review. She did not fire him at the gala. She did not accuse him of stealing. She collected his building badge and asked him to leave the stage area. I founded this organization, he said. The board governs it, she answered. That structure was in place before tonight. He looked toward me, perhaps expecting me to argue that his good work entitled him to his microphone. For 12 years I had helped him live inside that expectation. I had proofread grant letters, hosted young people at our table, and explained away the grander versions of his story because the work was real. Second Start had housed teenagers. Evan had sat beside hospital beds, answered calls at midnight, and persuaded landlords to take chances. Those truths made the falsehood harder, not smaller. He had built something valuable and then treated its value as permission to control everyone attached to it. Come home with me, he said. We can fix the board in the morning. I'm not going home with you. His face altered. He had prepared for donor doubt, board hesitation, even Diane's anger. He had not prepared for my refusal to resume the marriage backstage. Nora, don't be theatrical. I am standing beside a coat rack. You know what I mean. Yes. You mean private enough that you can rewrite it later. He moved closer and kept his voice low. If you walk away now, you make every enemy I have ever had right. That was the old mechanism in a new form. My action existed only as evidence for his narrative. I said, I'm going to my sister's tonight. Tomorrow, communication goes through text unless it concerns immediate safety or shared bills. He stared at me. You're ending our marriage over a speech? No. I'm leaving tonight because you tried to make me erase a living woman, used my voice without my words, and then told a room to ask me for your truth. Evan said he had done those things for the mission. I asked for his car key because the vehicle was registered to the nonprofit. Celeste said transportation would handle it. I did not touch his phone, wallet, or coat. I did not freeze accounts from the lobby. I took my purse and the overnight bag I kept in my trunk for clinic emergencies. So you planned this? He asked. I planned for a snowstorm, I said. You are not the center of every object. The gala resumed without him. Malik introduced a public school counselor and a landlord who had reserved 4 units for young adults aging out of foster care. The guests who remained listened more carefully than they had during the opening reception. The work continued in a smaller, less flattering frame. I watched from the back for 10 minutes, long enough to see that leaving Evan did not require abandoning everyone he had taught me to care about. Then I drove to my sister's apartment. Halfway there, my phone filled with messages. Evan sent 6. The first said I had humiliated him. The second said Diane had manipulated me. The third said the board had been waiting for an excuse. The fourth said his trauma was not a courtroom fact. The fifth asked whether I had taken his navy garment bag. The sixth said, please come home. I answered only the 5th. The bag was still in the ballroom coat room. It was the first time in our marriage I refused to defend myself against all the other sentences. The board review took 7 weeks. I will compress it because the process was not the story, the choices people made during it were. Second Start hired outside counsel to review the award submission, campaign materials, donor restrictions, and use of my interview. The financial audit found no stolen program money and no invented residents. The beds, rent assistance, and casework were real. The review also found that Evan had repeated the motel fire story in 3 grant applications, approved the false account in the award nomination, overridden Kendra's objection to my edited quote, and told staff that both Leah and I had verified his family history. The bank foundation withdrew the naming pledge but offered the same amount over 2 years for an unnamed building if Second Start changed leadership and strengthened review of personal claims. That was not the cinematic collapse Evan predicted. It was a narrower consequence. The building would open later and carry no dead woman's name. Evan resigned before the board voted on termination. His public statement said he had used metaphorical language to communicate emotional abandonment. It did not mention the apron. Diane declined interview requests and asked the organization in writing not to use her name, image, recipes, or personal history. The board agreed. Malik stayed with Second Start as a volunteer but refused the paid spokesperson role Evan had once promised him. Kendra kept her job after the records showed she had objected. The organization survived because it had never truly belonged to one man, no matter how often he stood in its photographs. My marriage did not survive so neatly. Evan and I spent 2 sessions with a counselor, not to reconcile but to decide whether a conversation was possible without an audience. In the first, he apologized for panicking at the gala. In the second, he admitted he had refused Diane's letters and let me believe the refusal came from her. When I asked why, he said I admired the son who escaped. If I knew his mother lived 20 minutes away, volunteered at the same pantry, and sometimes asked for a place in our lives, I might see him as cruel instead of wounded. So you managed what I was allowed to know about you, I said. Everyone does that in a marriage. Not by inventing the other person's choices. He told me Diane had been unreliable, drunk during parts of his adolescence, and vicious when ashamed. Diane later confirmed more of that than he expected. She had missed school conferences. She had borrowed $60 from Leah's birthday money and taken months to repay it. Once, during an argument, she told 16-year-old Evan he was exactly like his father, knowing he had watched his father die slowly from heart failure. Evan's pain was not fictional. The fire was. Her death was. My consent was. The counselor asked whether there was any version of accountability that would let me return home. Evan said he could correct the biography, apologize to staff, and keep Diane out of our private life. He did not understand that I was not demanding a reunion with his mother. I was demanding the right to know when my name, face, and voice were being used to erase someone. You keep making her access to you the issue, I said. The issue is your access to me. He called that a phrase built for a therapist. I said it was still true. We separated formally. Our finances were ordinary, a house with 11 years left on the mortgage, 2 retirement accounts, my clinic salary, his reduced consulting income, and no children. Through mediation we sold the house and divided the equity under our state's rules. I did not seek Second Start's funds or his future speaking income. He did not receive a heroic ruin, and I did not receive a windfall. I rented a 2-bedroom duplex near my clinic because, after years of event boxes and young volunteers sleeping on our couch, one bedroom felt unnaturally quiet. The second became a sewing room I barely used. For a while I woke whenever the mail slot clicked. I would stand over the envelopes and read every name twice. Evan's lie had changed a mundane household sound into a warning. Diane and I did not become instant family. The first time she called after the gala, I let it go to voicemail because I was afraid every conversation with her would become another trial of Evan. Her message lasted 19 seconds. I am not asking you to choose me, she said. I just wanted you to know I never asked him to keep me from you. I listened 3 times and waited 2 days before calling back. We met at a diner halfway between our homes. She brought no envelopes. I brought no questions about the motel. We talked about my father's funeral, which she had learned about months afterward from Leah. She said she would have sent flowers. I believed she might have. Belief was no longer something I gave automatically, but neither was suspicion. We agreed on one rule: neither of us would use the other to carry messages to Evan. That boundary saved whatever relationship we might have. Leah was less careful. She was furious at her brother and wanted me to release every email to the local paper. I refused. The board, donor, and award committee had the relevant records. Publicly feeding the story would not give Diane back the years she had been declared dead. It would only keep all of us attached to Evan's version of the event. Leah accused me of protecting him. Diane surprised both of us by saying, no. She is refusing to make him the family business. 4 months after the gala, Evan and Diane met once with the counselor. They did not reconcile. They each acknowledged the harm that was actually theirs, refused the harm that was not, and agreed to no public references or unexpected visits. Their contact remained limited, but it was no longer managed through a lie bearing my name. Evan and I finalized our divorce 9 months after the gala. On the courthouse steps he said the award committee had offered to reconsider him if he submitted a corrected personal statement. I declined, he said. They wanted me to apologize for surviving. I almost argued. Then I realized he was offering me the same role one final time: witness, editor, approving audience. That was your choice, I said. He waited for more. I gave him none. The following spring, Second Start opened 28 apartments instead of the 40 originally planned. The building was called North Harbor House. Its lobby wall listed donors, staff, residents who advised on the design, and the neighborhood coalition that fought for the zoning change. Evan's name appeared on a small founder plaque because removing the true part of his work would have repeated his own mistake. Diane's name did not appear because she had asked for privacy. At the opening, Celeste invited me as a former volunteer. I went, then nearly turned around when I saw a catering crew carrying aprons through the service entrance. One of the women asked whether I could hold the door. I did. That should have been an ordinary gesture, but my hands shook afterward. Malik found me beside the elevators and said Diane was upstairs on the resident kitchen floor. She knows you're here, he added. She said you get to decide. I took the stairs. Diane stood at a stainless steel counter teaching 2 residents how to make biscuits. She wore a volunteer badge with her full name printed in black, Diane Mercer. No family label. No memorial language. No one had assigned her a role she did not choose. She looked up and pointed a floury spoon at me. Before you say anything, the flour is clean. I laughed, and the sound startled me because it was uncomplicated. We worked side by side for an hour. She measured shortening. I cut parchment circles. Neither of us talked about Evan until a young resident noticed the founder plaque downstairs and asked whether Diane was related to him. The room went quiet in the small way rooms do when people sense an adult question behind a simple one. Diane wiped her hands on her apron. This apron was hers. She had put it on herself. I'm his mother, she said. Then she looked at me, not for permission, only to make sure I was still there. The resident nodded and asked if Evan knew how to bake. Diane said, not a thing. He burns toast. Everyone moved on. A timer rang. I opened the oven, and warm air clouded my glasses. When I could see again, Diane was setting out a cooling rack beneath her own name.